We welcome Stephen Yates, Chief Executive Officer of DC International Advisory, formerly in the Bush administration. Stephen, a very good evening to you. The president will sit down with Xi Jinping, the leader of the Communist Party. Will he get a baseball bat out and, acting as a good Al Capone figure, slug him on the head until he stops stealing? Good evening to you, Stephen.
Good evening, John. That would make some tremendous theatrics, but I suspect that's not in the talking points, as they like to call them in D.C. these days. We have a lot of theater in our bilateral summits. I suspect this will be part of the long piece of empty talk, really.
Stephen, I've almost seen this movie before as we talk to the Chinese about cyber theft, and, they just sort of defer this so they can continue to take technology. This is sort of like the North Korean negotiations, isn't it? We just talked to the North Koreans, and they continue to perfect their nuclear weapons and increase the range of their ballistic missiles. Isn't that really the same thing, just a different subject matter?
Yes, and I think there's a similar theory behind both approaches that the practitioners of this theory have, that they believe that if they talk long enough, the party in question will evolve out of their problem. The Chinese will become so modern, so integrated into the world that they will change their nature. The North Koreans, we talk long enough, the regime will collapse and some kind of a change will come about that is more natural and smooth. Both of them are false. And it is, of course, true that the Chinese and whomever they are enabling are able to continue the theft, and in some ways it has security and economic consequences.
I ask Stephen first and then Gordon. I'm told, reporting by David Sanger, that the Chinese have agreed to sit down with American equals on this, co-equals, and discuss cybersecurity starting July, because, of course, the Chinese position, the official position, is we don't do it. You're accusing us of something we don't do, and by the way, you spy too. Stephen, is that advisable that we sit down to talk to the Chinese? Is that sufficient to change their pattern?
It is not, but I also think that common-sense individuals would understand you don't reform someone's behavior through dialogue, in the sense of this is someone who doesn't really want to steal your valuables. They just can't stop this behavior. What you have is someone who really wants to be able to disable our military capabilities with cyber and to seek advantage with technology and economically inside the United States.
During the first Obama term, John, the president, then Defense Secretary Panetta, and lower-tier officials talked to their Chinese counterparts about this, and yet the spying and the cyber intrusions spiked dramatically in the middle of last year. This year, we have sent Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Martin Dempsey, Secretary of State John Kerry to Beijing to talk about cyber. And what happened? The attacks just increased a couple of months ago. And the interesting thing is Stephen Eisenberg, who works for you, John, his theory is that this increase in cyber attacks this year is sort of like the opening round of negotiations in connection with this meeting that is going to start on Friday. It's basically the Chinese are saying, we're going to do this even more so we have a better bargaining position going in.
All right, Stephen, in the old days, the way you would do this is that you tell your army to keep going. Let's roll up as much territory as possible before we sit down for peace negotiations. Is that what the Chinese are doing? They're going to grab as much as they can that's not absolutely nailed down with a gun in its hand, and then they're going to talk about cybersecurity.
It is a classic negotiating tactic, but I think the main inhibitor on it really being what they're trying to do is that they're getting so much out of it now. They have the ability with increased cyber to negate the technological advantage we have and those that our allies might have in concert to try to deter them militarily. And they have benefited so much from being able to use state resources to enhance their state-owned enterprises in their international investment and trade. So I just think there's profound disincentives for them to stop.
The GDP in China now boastfully in the 7% range, Gordon. I'm told, this is reporting again by David Sanger, that in order to maintain that paltry 7% they have now, they must steal. They must grab technology. They're not developing it. I'm talking about the PLA because that's what's doing it. It's not a private enterprise. It's the PLA. That China's leadership believes without piracy, they will wither. Is that accurate? Are they that fragile? And is that a way for the U.S. to deal with them, that we can stop their growth?
Well, we certainly could if we adopted the commission, the Blair-Huntsman Commission. Their last-ditch proposal is to impose a tariff of 150% of the benefits that China has received from cyber attacks from all Chinese products entering the United States. And, John, of course they claim 7.7%, but it's really about 3%. And when you're down to about 3%, they got another problem, and that is that their manufacturing sector, which is the largest part of the Chinese economy, is actually shrinking right now. So, without these cyber attacks, their manufacturing would be falling right through the floor.
Stephen, you were in government, you're watching government now. I understand the hot ticket in Washington is to slap cyber on your request from Congress for the budgets for next year. Does that mean it's being taken seriously in Washington, or is this a game and they think it'll all go away?
I think that there actually is some seriousness to people understanding that this is a problem. I fear that we are very late to this game. The Chinese have been active at this. Even the lowly North Koreans, the Iranians, many others, the Russians in tow, have been very active in developing offensive cyber capabilities. The United States has not. We focused primarily on defense and not even enough there. I think we're now aware of the gap. The question is, how serious will we be at closing the gap? And these others may actually rush now to increase attacks before we get serious about defenses and the ability to retaliate.
Gordon, a hard question. Has Xi Jinping already won this?
No, for one important reason, and that is their economy right now is in, I think, an extremely fragile state. And so essentially this country is going to fall out from underneath him. But if that weren't the case, I'd be a bit worried.
All right, Stephen, a hard question for you. Is the Chinese economy in any worse shape than the Obama administration right now? You live in Washington. What's the buzz?
Well, the Obama administration is in distress, but they have many, many allies ready to resuscitate them or get people to turn away from the problem. In that way, I think China is actually similar. They have many, many ministers at court and equivalents ready to help people to look the other way and ignore the distressing signals that Gordon has chronicled about how fragile they are. As long as they continue to have those boosters, the critical mass of investors and politicians will believe there is not a serious problem for them.
Final question, Stephen. Does President Obama bring up cyber theft to Xi Jinping face-to-face? Does he use that term to him?
My sense is that they'll use the word cybersecurity as a way to be even-handed and speak in a benign way about it. He should use cyber theft and should speak of it as, frankly, an act of virtual terrorism.
Stephen Yates is the Chief Executive Officer of DC International Advisory. He served in the Bush administration. Gordon Chang of Forbes.com. And Xi Jinping, he's a pirate. I'm John Batchelor. For audio podcasts of these stories and more, you can go to johnbatchelorShow.com or iTunes. This is The John Batchelor Show.